Me in studio, of course, still Malcolm Jorgensen, lecturer from the United States Studies Centre. Malcolm, you've heard a lot of these State of the Union addresses. How would you rate this one from the President?
Well, I think he very much stuck to theme. The theme that he's had for his entire presidency, very much focusing on the fact that he's standing up for middle-class America. And so he was quite forceful in his taking up the fight to Republicans. I note, for instance, that he talked about explicitly he would veto certain bills coming from the Congress. So this wasn't the language of someone who was seeking a genuine reconciliation with the Congress, pragmatically knowing that they won't pass the bills that he wants anyway. But he said that in relation to some of the financial reforms he's put in place, that if these are wound back by the Congress, that he will veto them. And he framed this in the context of this theme of, quote, middle-class economics works, is what he was talking about. And so that really was what this was about, the tax changes that he'll put in place, some of the initiatives such as increasing childcare, sick leave entitlements.
Free community college.
Free community college, this other initiative that he's announced. And so he's really pointing out that there is this divide in the United States and that the people are going to ultimately benefit from these initiatives, despite the fact that he used language towards the end of conciliatory actions between Republicans and Democrats.
He spoke very much throughout it, the address very much laced with the idea of not letting politics get in the way. You mentioned what he describes as the success of middle-class income, but saying the caveat being we can't let politics get in the way. Towards the end of his address, he started to talk about the need to not let shutdowns happen, the need to get beyond this divisive, if you like, divisive political climate that has really gripped America. The likelihood of that actually happening?
I think that there's going to be a continuation of much of this gridlock. It really does go deep down to the point that, I mean, there have been examples even of the Republicans putting forward certain bills to the Senate, and then when they realise that they're going to assist the President in some ways, voting against their own bills.
They don't like him, to be honest. Isn't that the case? Republicans do not like the President.
It's quite clear that, I mean, these things only really work if you can give credit where it's due, even if you don't like a person's general policy stance. I think that you could argue that in many cases, no credit's given even when it may be due, that Republicans still try and claim credit for some of the things that the President may have assisted. And so I think there certainly will be this continuation of gridlock, which is why the President was in some ways trying to speak over the Congress to the American people directly, which is what really this platform is about.
One of the interesting criticisms of the President from the Republican side is this idea that he is arrogant, to put it bluntly. There was a slight piece. He seemed to, for the majority of the address, he stuck to script. He did go off script a little bit when talking about election campaigning, and the arrogance being at the end, the ad-lib, that he's won every election he's gone for.
Yes, I mean, the line that was in the prepared transcript was there are no more campaigns to run, and then he added, when there was applause from the audience, I know because I've won both of the elections that he's run. I think in the circumstances of the speech, it really is the case that he has no more elections to run, and so he's pointing out and re-emphasising to the Congress, I think, that he does have some sort of mandate, despite the fact that this seems to be denied by the Congress. And so, yes, his detractors will probably call this arrogant, but again, it's re-emphasising that there is some legitimacy to him having this broad vision for the country and trying to carry it out.
Does that broad vision, do you think, and the manner in which he's put it forward at the State of the Union address, do you think it gains traction where it matters, and that's Capitol Hill? We spoke before his address. His approval ratings are the highest they've been in years, at about some 50%, but does it count where it matters?
Well, it depends what you think matters. So, no, I don't think that it has a lot of traction on Capitol Hill with many of the Republicans who'd be required to pass these bills. But again, he's thinking ahead to 2016, that he's thinking of setting up the parameters of that presidential debate. And I think that these ideas really do resonate with many Americans. I mean, there has been this long-going debate about, you know, what's sometimes colloquially called trickle-down economics since the Reagan administration, where tax rates were slashed from around 70% at the top rate down to 28%. And ever since, this argument has persisted of whether or not that's the way to create jobs in the economy. Obama, when he says the line middle-class economics works, is really him trying to emphasise that argument, that government does have a role is still relevant, and that's really what he's trying to promote in his administration.
It was interesting as well, and he has done this of late, and that is using a real-life example. I think he spoke of Rebecca, and I think it was Bill, and we saw Rebecca there sat in between the First Lady Michelle Obama and the Vice President's wife, and talking about the struggles that they had, the fact that they had to basically reskill, do it tough, and now are prospering. And he was using that as an example to the broader US populace and the broader US story that we've seen come through the GFC. How powerful a message do you think that is?
Well, I think that it is one that will resonate with people, seeing that this person's like me. But it was really the way that he framed it which was most important, because he talked about some of the economic recovery that's been experienced in the United States. And then again, this key phrase, middle-class economics works, was tied directly to that, to say that there has been all of this recovery, but it hasn't flowed through to people like this. And that even apart from moral considerations of equity, it may be better for the economy if this wealth is spread. So, for instance, his increase in the capital gains tax that has been announced, this is the way this has been framed is he talks about accumulated wealth, that in some ways this is an improper advantage to wealthy Americans, and that it's hardworking Americans who have to pay tax, and so this accumulated wealth is a separate issue. And so that's again one way of emphasising that he's for working class Americans, and that this idea of the government not taxing doesn't necessarily encompass these richer Americans who may have improper wealth, if you like, is the way it's been framed.
A couple of final things I wanted to get your thoughts on. One, he referred to the Asia-Pacific region, interestingly naming China as a competitor, if you like, in terms of setting the rules, setting the trade rules and the security rules within this region, and that the US, through its bilateral, multilateral relationships, of course, of which Australia is a part of, needs to lead that. I mean, it seemed like quite a combative type of rhetoric from Obama.
I think it was interesting that he mentioned the Asia-Pacific. It was noted that last year there's this idea of the Asia pivot, that America's going to turn its focus to this part of the world, and yet they've still remained looking at Europe and the Middle East. But he mentioned the Asia-Pacific. He talked about modernising alliances. That encompasses Australia's vision here. And also the Trans-Pacific Partnership was really what he was getting at in terms of the authority he needed from Congress to get these alliances done. And he frames the Trans-Pacific Partnership not in the economic terms that some have used to oppose this, arguing that it will take jobs away from Americans, but that this was about security in some ways, setting the rules in the Asia-Pacific through alliances such as this, and that was a reason for Congress to support that.
And that is speaking to the Republicans, isn't it? Framing it in that way, which is similar to what he did with climate change. Again, framing it along the lines of national security. A big departure from the way that the issue has been portrayed previously.
Yes, very much. I mean, he's talked again about the moral implications of this in the past, which might be good for the base. But he talks about the fact that the Pentagon, the Defence Department in the United States, has prepared reports where they've talked about this as being one of the key security concerns of the 21st century. And so he talks about that because those are the kind of values that do appeal to Republicans. And if you can reframe it in that way, then maybe there is some genuine ground for agreement.
All right, look, on that note, we are going to leave it there. Malcolm Jorgensen, thank you very much for your time and analysis. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a quick break.